Welcome to The Exchange, the program that introduces you to lots of interesting people. Throughout the season, we'll be exchanging many ideas on wide-ranging topics that affect all of us every day. I'm Rob Buckingham, and my co-host on The Exchange is my wife, Christie.
It's great to be here. Looking forward to what the show has today.
On today's show, we'll discuss the great Australian dream of owning your own home. With interest rates at an all-time low, is owning your own home achievable today, or is it out of reach for many young Australians? To discuss this topic, we're delighted to be joined by a woman who's worked in all areas of the real estate industry, and that is Cashmore.
Hello,
Catherine.
good to be here. Thank you. Thank you very much.
We're also very happy to be joined by Martin Vidakovic, who is the Managing Director of the 500 Group that specialises in mortgage finance and wealth management. Welcome, Martin. Good to have you with us.
Fantastic to be here, Christie.
Before we start our discussion, let's take a look at this.
Houses are everywhere. It's not hard to find one. Walk into one, but own one now. That's another story altogether. With the property market in a boom right now, or is it in a lull? I can never keep up. When is the right time to buy? And what do you need to make sure you've checked before signing the final paperwork? Owning your own house. Now that's the dream. Can it be a reality?
Well, a very practical topic today on The Exchange. Martin and Catherine, let's get your answer to the question first of all. Is it still the Australian dream to own your own home? Martin?
I think it is. I mean, I love property, but I think there's one thing to have a dream and there's another thing to have a reality, and I think it's a great topic of conversation to be discussing. And I do believe it's a reality, but you do have to have a goal and a strategy behind that reality to make it happen in this day and age.
Sure. Catherine?
I think it is as well. And I think that what you've got to remember, particularly when you're going into buying a property, is unlike it was, say, maybe, a few decades ago where you buy a house and that would be it for a long time. Our lives are much more transitional now. So when you buy a property, it's important to remember that it's not going to be the last property that you buy. It is going to be the first property, and it's going to do you for a number of years, and then perhaps you might move on. But certainly it can be a reality.
That's good to know. Is it harder than it used to be? Do we need more?
I think it's always been difficult.
Okay.
Always been hard for first home buyers. And I think what's difficult now is the capital cost of real estate is a lot more than it used to be. And unlike 10 years ago, where you could almost be assured that you would sell into a rising market, our market isn't going to rise at the same rate that it has been rising for the prior 10 years. We're going to be going into a lower capital growth atmosphere, and that is going to affect, obviously, how people think about real estate going forward.
And I think you have to work out why you're buying property in this day and age as well. It has changed quite a bit even from 15, 20 years ago. And I think, again, what's the intention? Because 15, 20 years ago, it was about community. It was about memories. It was about so many different things. I think there's still an element of that, but now you've got to add strategy to that if you're using it as a wealth creation tool, or if you're looking to be transient and be able to move properties every 5 to 10 years.
What percentage of people do you think it is that use buying property as a wealth issue versus a place to live?
Yeah, so about 44% of our market are investors, and that's more than it used to be. So it used to be about a third of the market would be sort of investors, and then you get the first home buyers. First home buyers are a very low percentage at the moment as a percentage of people that are actually buying in the market. I think because real estate, well, there's a few reasons. I think at the moment, investors are realising that, interest rates are very low. They're not going to get much return out of savings in the bank. We've had a stock market crash in recent years, and so that has
gives
also...
people the jitters, doesn't it?
It does,
Yeah.
and real estate is something that is tangible, something that people can do something with. You can put a tenant in there. I think most people realise that it is a long-term asset, and it's something you've got to hold on to for the long term. But yields are very good at the moment, so in most capital cities, yields have gone up. And because in Australia, what we have in Australia is kind of like a donut situation, whereas we're all donutted around our capital cities. No one really wants to move to the outskirts where the train lines don't go. Well, certainly in Melbourne, they sort of don't go to the outskirts, and that makes the situation for renters. We have a high rental population in the inner suburban areas of our capital cities.
So, Catherine, what are some of the tips that you would suggest for getting into the market?
Yeah, so the first one is to remember that the first home isn't going to be the last home that you buy, and that to some extent with a first home buy, you've got to protect yourself because you're going to have to start fairly small. unless you go to the outskirts of the city and you buy a house and land package, which if you do, you need to be aware that you're not going to get much growth, much capital growth there, because there are land releases that are going on, and obviously it's not going to be as much growth as you would get in the inner areas of the city. But I think you have to remember that you start small, and you need to buy somewhere where you're going to be comfortable for the next sort of 5 to 7 years, and somewhere where you know that perhaps you can either leverage off that as an investment and then upgrade as you go through the different stages of your life. But certainly that's one thing that I do tell first home buyers. The other thing is to save. You've got to saving for a deposit is really difficult, but you have to do that. You have to be able to save, and you have to be able to do that mentally anyway, because when you have a house and when you have the commitment of a mortgage, you know yourself, you've got to be quite strict about your spending and make sure that you budget very carefully with the household budget. It's extremely difficult for single first home buyers. It's much easier when you get into a couple and there's two of you that are working towards that. There's a few different strategies that I talk about with first home buyers. So there's a way of perhaps staying at home, if you can stay at home longer, and perhaps buy an investment before you buy your own home.
Live off your parents.
That's right, yeah, live off the parents. And look, that's not uncommon now. I mean, tapping into the bank of mum and dad is something that's going on not only in Australia, but it's happening in England, it's happening in Canada. You know, it's one of those things that it is getting harder and harder to raise that deposit because the capital cost is high, so the deposit is the difficult thing to do. You might have some
absolutely.
ideas
I
on
think
that.
your point's a great point. And that's the thing, if you can get to a point where the best tip is be nice to your mum and dad, because even if you can stay at home and save that deposit, it means absolutely everything. But also from a point of view that if you're actually looking to be able to utilise equity from mum and dad, you can do a limited guarantee, so you can actually borrow that deposit from them and get into the market. So there are things that you can do on that front, but more importantly, set the right behaviours up front. Exactly what Catherine was saying. If you put 35% of your savings away as a habit of your income, put that away just as a habit. You know, you'll still have your lifestyle, you'll still pay expenses on bills and phones, but if you can just set up great habits from the start, even prior to having a mortgage, I think that's the biggest issue, is the financial literacy coming through from those first home buyers. I think that's a real key component. If we can set people up early on, they'll do the right behaviours. It's going to make it easier for them to access funding down the track.
So be nice to your parents.
Absolutely.
And save hard, right?
Yes.
These are really good things. What are some of the common mistakes, Martin, that people make when they're buying a house?
They're unprepared.
Okay.
So they might not have paid a phone bill 2 years ago and think that doesn't make a difference. So again, it comes back to that other point. But the most common mistake is being not prepared for the situation. So they haven't been in that position where they've had expenses going out. They don't know what their budgeting is in regards to lifestyle. And I think that's a key component. That's the biggest mistake that I see. And once they've got the strategies and structures right, you'll find that moves into the mortgage side of it as well. But that's a very common mistake.
So would you say then that rent money is dead money? You've heard that said, I'm sure. What do you guys think of that?
I think you can use your rental savings now with some. Doesn't that count towards with some lenders?
It does.
They will look at that.
It does. And
So you can actually show them that you have rented over a period of time. If you're renting a property rather than buying a property, you can show them that as part of it.
Correct.
That's
It's
right.
it's a behaviour that you still need to have 5 or 10% deposit, but it shows from a behavioural standpoint that you actually can make those commitments. So and that's really
So from
important.
that perspective, it's actually better to be out from mum and dad
But the interesting
show
thing,
them that you can rent.
Well, that's true,
Yeah.
but the trouble is actually saving a deposit, because if you think
Correct.
in most capital cities, I mean, I'm from Melbourne, so I know Melbourne better than anywhere else, and I know to rent a one-bedroom in the inner city area, you're looking at sort of like anywhere between 280 to 350 a week, maybe even more depending on where you go. So to have that on a normal wage is very difficult then to save outside of that, you know, for a deposit, and that's where it
you're
gets
right.
difficult.
You're right. And thinking outside the square a little bit here. So even if you were to rent in an area you really wanted to, and your repayments were lower than having a mortgage in that area, as long as you invest the difference. Like someone was saying to me just
spending
yesterday.
it all the time.
Yeah, $1,500 savings at 8% return is $1 million in 20 years.
Wow.
But you've got to do something.
Sure.
That's where you've got to get the advice.
and
it
are people
starts now.
saving? Are people saving?
Well, before we go
Oh,
into
sorry.
that, we need to take a break, but we'll come back. It's great discussion, and we'll be back with more in just a moment on The Exchange. Welcome back to The Exchange. We're having an interesting discussion with real estate analyst Cashmore and mortgage specialist Martin Vidakovic about whether it's realistic for Australians to own their own homes. Martin, let's just pick this up with you. What do you need to keep in mind when buying a property?
I think it comes down to where do you want to live, first of all. It's very different when you're buying a home that you want to live in as opposed to buying a home for investment. So you want to know your financial circumstances, you want to know that your income's there to cover your commitments, and that's one of the main things, and also your deposit. So again, being prepared to make sure you can make that choice happen, take that opportunity when it arises, and best prepare yourself for a property.
Okay.
Can I just add a little bit to that? Because I think any first home buyer needs to go into the market with a bit of investment criteria in mind, because you're not going to want to live there, as I said, for the rest of your life. You're going to be thinking about the next 5 to 7 years, and then a job change, or perhaps you want to start a family. And in that situation, you're going to want to tap into the equity in the property, and you're going to hope that it's appreciated in value. So you do need to keep that a little bit in mind.
So you mentioned earlier on in the show about moving out versus staying central, and what are the pros and cons of that?
Yeah, certainly if you go into the fringe area. So if you go into the growth areas, what you're likely to do is buy a house and land package, sit in it for the next 10 years, and at the end of the next 10 years, it's going to be worth the same as when you purchased it. It's not going to have appreciated in value, and there's a lot of reasons for that. First of all, whenever you buy new, the first thing that happens to the home is it ages. So it's going to lose some of its wow factor, and it's going to lose some of its initial value. Secondly, there's land releases in these places, so you'll see a lot of land being released, a lot of new housing being built. And when new people come into the area, what they're typically looking at is their compensation for moving so far out from the city is to buy somewhere new. And so they're not going to be looking at a second-hand house to buy a second-hand house. So you're not likely to get a lot of growth if you go into the outskirts. It's all right if you want to have your 4-bedroom house and you want to stay there for the next 10, 20 years. That's fine if it's
and
a
you'd be paying
lifestyle
off
choice.
your mortgage during that time
That's
as
right,
well.
That's right.
Yeah.
If it's a lifestyle choice, there's nothing wrong with it. I know if you're thinking about moving outwards to buy something that's more affordable, it's best to move into the closest regional town even,
right,
than going into the fringe suburbs, somewhere that has already got industry, somewhere that's perhaps got a university that has some kind of manufacturing industry going on there, something that's got good jobs growth. It's got perhaps a train station where you can get a train to the nearest capital city, and so that there are opportunities there to commute, and you'll find that you'll get more growth out of those areas than you will on the fringes.
And you hear people talk about a bad time or a good time to buy. Is there actually a right time to buy, or is that an urban myth?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's certainly cycles in real estate. So particularly when you're in a market that has a very rampant auction atmosphere, it's very typical for the market to get carried away when confidence lifts. So particularly in the inner suburbs of Melbourne or the inner suburbs of Sydney, when people start to see properties sell on the street, they start to think that the market's getting away from them, and they need to get in quickly before it gets too high. And the growth that you see in those inner and middle ring suburbs is unsustainable over the long term, and I would caution anybody getting involved in that sort of scenario.
Okay. We might just actually take a break right there. I'd like to hear what the people out on the street have to say about this. We'll go to Street Talk.
Some say it's the great Australian dream. For others, it may just remain a dream. Is it possible to have your own home today?
I think so, because there's so much suburban culture going on here, and there's so much land, so everybody still thinks in that way that they can live a little bit on the outskirts and still have something brand new.
I'd say it definitely is. It's probably just a bit more difficult now. I know that's something that I want to eventually achieve one day.
It is, yep, for sure.
No, I don't think it is anymore. I think everyone's sort of looking to, I guess, investment properties, not to live there. Maybe that's what it's moved to.
I think it's sort of everyone's dream to own their own home. I think it's an ambition to go for in your life. Why not?
Yes, I do. I think there's more things that people dream about now, but it's still up there as what people want. Like, I know I definitely want to have my own home one day.
It's a dream for a lot of people now, sure, and especially at a younger age too.
And do you think it's achievable today?
It is. I actually own my own home.
I think it's achievable, but you probably need to go halves, or even take an element of go halves with a friend, get a contract drawn up. It's not necessarily clean cut and dry that you get married and buy a house.
It seems you have to keep going further and further out. I know my sister's been living in the city and she's got to move out to the burbs to make it work. So it's such a big lifestyle sacrifice to be able to do it. So I think that's why it's so unappealing.
I'm staying at home as long as possible just so I can get a good little nest egg so that when I do move out, I'm not going to be, barely able to feed myself sort of thing. So people sort of stay at home a little longer so that they can, move out successfully rather than struggling and then ending up back at home.
Yeah, much more than where I come from back in England. Then you've got far more of a chance of sort of raising the capital over here than you do over there.
Yes, but I don't think it's easy as it used to be for, like, say, my parents.
Is it your dream to own your own home?
No, not really. No, I have I never really had that much interest in it. And I've accepted I'm an artist, so I've accepted perhaps renting my whole life. So that's what I've come to.
What age would you like to be able to own your own home?
Now? I'm 21 pretty soon, so in the next few years, hopefully, but money, money, money.
Joining us now is the Exchange's Street Talk reporter, Sandra Cavallo. Welcome.
Hi, Rob. Hi, Christy.
Good to have you with us.
Great to be here.
There's some good thoughts out on the streets there.
Yeah, absolutely. There was quite a mix.
Yeah.
A bit of a mix of, some people thinking, yes, it is still the Australian dream to own your own home.
Mm-hmm.
Some people not so much. One of the things you may not have picked up in that package is that I sensed with the younger people particularly that it felt quite hard to achieve, or there was other priorities like travel or doing other things.
But wasn't the girl, the interesting-looking individual? Wasn't that amazing?
She was amazing.
She was amazing.
She was
really
not conservative in her looks, but certainly conservative and well thought out in stay at home, get a nest egg, and
and I think it's very common of that age to think, yep, I'll stay home till maybe late 20s, and then think about moving out and finding a place.
But she's actually saving. Some people stay at home so that they can have the lifestyle.
Well, that's right too.
Yeah.
Now, certainly, if you look at the census data, what you'll find is there are more group households where people are staying together for a longer period of time and even renting together, and that's for affordability reasons because obviously your costs are lower and so you can save. So that's very much a reality at the moment.
Martin?
And we're seeing some very savvy teenagers as well from our business, where you do have now kids with great incomes that are coming through at 70, 80 grand, staying at home, really saving a lot of money and then going into the market. So they're actually planning in advance. So we do see that element as well, which is really encouraging.
Teenagers with 70 to 80 grand,
yeah,
I love that job.
It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. We had a 21-year-old that is a train driver and is earning $80,000 a year, and he said, Martin, this is a long-term plan over 10 years. He goes, I want to buy my home, but I also want to look at the opportunity of buying two investments, in the next 15 years. But the parents are providing a great foundation and support in order to really build that dream with the son. So I thought that was incredible.
We're seeing a guy who's really on the right track.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Well done.
Tish Boom, thank you so much.
Over the long term, do you guys both believe that house prices can only just keep going up, or are we going to hit a...
It's very difficult because we've really planned badly for population growth. So as I said, what we've done is we've managed to confine people to the capital cities. And so most first home buyers, when they're going to buy, if I was in England, and which is where I'm from, and I wouldn't even consider buying in London, but of course in Melbourne and Sydney, we've got the equivalent of sort of a London and Paris market where people are trying to stay around those inner city areas, and of course prices are very high. And, don't imagine that the market can't be manipulated for prices to continue to go up. I think what's important to understand is that they're not going to go up as fast as they did through our sort of golden years of growth, and that's for various reasons.
Right, okay. Thank you, Sandra, for popping in today.
Great to be here.
We look forward to you again next time. We'll be back in just a moment. You're on The Exchange. Welcome back to The Exchange, where our guest, real estate analyst Catherine Cashmore and mortgage specialist Martin Vidakovic have been giving their very wise advice on how to achieve the Australian dream of owning your own home. It's such a huge topic. Let's see if there's a solution.
Yeah, give us your top tips on how to make this happen.
Yeah, I think in regards to have your money working for you. So people don't realise, but as much as $50 a week on a mortgage can save $80,000 in interest.
I think I need to be
and
writing
5
down,
years.
writing down notes here.
Please do.
$50 a
If it's-
month, a week.
But even if it's like, if you look at that at $100 a week, all of a sudden it's $130,000, $140,000, and $200 a week is you basically pay your home loan off in 13 years, and this is on a $400 average mortgage. But you're also, you're saving a lot of money, nearly over $200,000 in interest.
That is amazing.
And a lot of people don't know that. The cost of not knowing that is enormous to an individual.
Yep.
I mean, it makes the lenders a lot of money,
Sure.
but that's what we're trying to do, educate people in regards to going, your money is valuable, let's use it in the right way.
I mean, most people would eat that $50 in packed lunches, or without packed
A
lunches.
few coffees a week.
Yeah,
That's exactly
that's
right.
great. That's
massive.
awesome.
Yeah. What about you, Catherine?
Yeah, I
your
mean,
top
I
tips?
think you've got to think outside the square. So even if you are stuck to living within the capital city areas, within that sort of inner suburban, middle suburban areas, think about different suburbs where perhaps you haven't been or have previously had a stigma about them, and go exploring and have a look. Go to a few auctions, have a look at what the prices are going for, do a little bit of research to see if you can move outside of your comfort zone and find a property that's still well located but is a lower capital cost than it would be if you were going to buy in one of the more popular areas, or perhaps an area where you went to school or your friends are.
And when you say well located, what would be the things that you would think of there?
Make sure that you're around where public transport is the number one for all buyers. All buyers want to be close to public transport. It's the number one request most buyer advocates get. So make sure that you're walking distance to a train station, that you've got good amenities around you, that you're not buying a property that's oversupplied. So there's a lot of apartment blocks that are going up in our inner cities. So be very well aware of what the developments are around you, and make sure that you're buying a property that you feel that is established, and that you feel that you're going to be comfortable in for a period of time before you have to move on.
And Martin, would you go in with other people to purchase a property? Would that work?
I think you can. I think what's really important, Rob, is to have a plan. So to have a plan of attack, and I think that's the thing, to see external specialists, to be able to sit down, spend a couple of hours really working out what that best plan is for you as an individual, as a couple, or as a family. And I think there are certain elements where, that's a great option. But I think once you understand what your capabilities are, then you can move forward. So often it's a reactive thing where people see a property, I want it now, instead of being prepared in advance. And I think that's really important, is to have that plan of attack up front. And not only can it save you, but it can make you a lot of money as well.
Yeah, wonderful. Martin and Catherine, thank you so much for your time today. I have a feeling that people putting this information into practice...
Absolutely. Well, I think we should do something about it ourselves.
I totally agree. It's going to save them a whole lot of money, so we really appreciate you both coming in. Please go to our website for some tips on home ownership from both Catherine and Martin, and for more information about this show, The Exchange. We look forward to seeing you next time.